The basketball world had already decided the outcome. The Indiana Fever were done. No Caitlin Clark, no chance. ESPN even had their headline ready. Lynx dominate Fever to win Commissioner's Cup. The script was written, the stage set for another disappointing loss. And honestly, who could blame them? The Fever had been falling apart without their star rookie. The ball stopped moving. Aaliyah Boston wasn't getting the touches she needed. Players were forcing shots, chemistry was gone, and the team looked completely lost. But then, something changed. Because when the lights were the brightest and the critics were the loudest, this Fever team didn't just survive. They stunned everyone. What happened next wasn't just a game. It was a complete rewriting of the WNBA narrative. And when Caitlin Clark walked into that locker room and dropped 6 simple words, it was like a mic drop heard around the entire league. Everybody in the league is sick. What led up to that viral moment is a story you won't believe, and it starts with total collapse. It didn't happen all at once. The unraveling was slow, painful, and obvious to anyone watching. The Indiana Fever weren't just losing games, they were losing themselves. Double-digit leads evaporated like clockwork. Games that should have been easy wins turned into late-game meltdowns. The offensive pace slowed to a crawl, killing the energy and rhythm that once made this team so dangerous. It wasn't just a slump, it was dysfunction in real time. The ball stopped moving. The extra pass disappeared. Instead of trusting each other, players started forcing up contested shots like they were auditioning for highlight reels. Aaliyah Boston, their paint-dominating star, would seal her defender perfectly, hands up, ready, and get ignored. She'd watch in frustration as teammates launched wild jumpers. It wasn't selfishness, it was desperation. But the result was the same: chaos. Without Caitlin Clark running the offense, the Fever lost their identity. Clark wasn't just their top scorer, she was the glue, the conductor, the voice. She kept the offense humming and the team connected. And now, with her sidelined by a groin injury, the system collapsed. Players looked unsure. Roles got blurry. Confidence drained possession by possession. Opponents noticed too. With Clark out, defenses zeroed in on Boston and Kelsey Mitchell. They didn't have to worry about anyone else picking them apart. The result? Crowded lanes, tough looks, and broken sets. The Fever weren't just down a player. They were down a leader, a rhythm, and a soul. But that low point was exactly what made what happened next so unbelievable. If you were writing a worst-case scenario for Indiana, this was it. A locker room full of question marks, an identity in shambles, and now, a Commissioner's Cup final against the best team in the league, the Minnesota Lynx, on their home floor, with everything on the line, and no Caitlin Clark. It wasn't just that Clark was absent, it was who they were facing without her. The Lynx were experienced, disciplined, and built to punish mistakes. They had Napheesa Collier, a certified superstar. They had chemistry, confidence, and momentum. Meanwhile, Indiana had doubt. From the media, from fans, and maybe even from themselves. Coach Christy Sides didn't sugarcoat it. This wasn't about learning or building for the future. "We want to take care of business now," she said. She wasn't interested in moral victories or silver linings. They weren't in this game just to compete. They were in it to win. But deep down, everyone knew the odds. The Fever were coming off games where they couldn't string together 4 quarters of good basketball. They lacked lineup consistency. They lacked rhythm. And now, they had to find both, immediately. On the biggest stage of their season, they were expected to fold, to come in timid, overwhelmed, and outmatched. But that's not what happened, because when the ball tipped, the Fever looked like a completely different team. From the very first possession, something felt off, but in the best possible way. The Indiana Fever didn't look scared. They didn't look hesitant. They looked hungry. This wasn't the sluggish, disconnected team we'd seen in recent games. This was a group on a mission. The ball was flying around the court. No more isolation, no more hero ball. Players moved with purpose, cutting hard, setting screens, trusting each other. The energy was electric. You could see it in their eyes. They weren't playing like they had something to prove. They were proving it every single trip down the floor. And that trust? It started on the sideline. Coach Sides never blinked. Even as the Lynx made early pushes, she kept preaching calm, composure, confidence. One possession at a time, she reminded them. And they listened. No panic, just poise. The team that had been collapsing in fourth quarters? Suddenly they were closing quarters with swagger. Every player, from the starters to the bench mob, bought in. No one tried to play hero. They played together. Every rebound was fought for. Every defensive switch was crisp. Every possession mattered. It was like they'd flipped a switch. And now they weren't just surviving without Caitlin Clark. They were thriving. And And the moment it became real, that's when the cheers began to rise. This wasn't just about effort, it was about execution. And Indiana's stars delivered a masterclass. Natasha Howard didn't just show up, she took over. The former Defensive Player of the Year looked like she was back in her prime, tearing through Minnesota's game plan with clinical precision. She dropped 16 points, snagged 12 rebounds, dished 4 assists, and added 2 steals for good measure. Every time the Lynx tried to mount a run, Howard answered, whether it was a key bucket in the paint or a clutch deflection that led to transition points. She was the engine. And when the dust settled, she wasn't just Indiana's MVP, she was the Commissioner's Cup MVP. Then there was Kelsey Mitchell, cold-blooded, efficient, unbothered. She came out in attack mode from the opening tip, blowing past defenders, hitting from deep and refusing to let the moment get too big. Her three-point shooting, over 40% for the season, became a dagger that Minnesota just couldn't stop. Mitchell wasn't trying to fill Clark's shoes. She was filling her own, and doing it in style. But perhaps the most satisfying performance came from Aaliyah Boston. Finally, Boston got the ball where she needed it. On the block, in motion, facing up defenders. And she feasted. 12 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists. It wasn't just the stat line, it was the way she played. Calm, powerful, confident. She battled all-star Napheesa Collier and refused to back down. This was the version of Boston fans had been waiting for. And the fact that she delivered when it mattered most? That said everything. The stars aligned, the chemistry clicked, and the Fever found something special. But here's what made this night unforgettable. Because it wasn't just the stars who shined. While the headlines may belong to the MVPs, this win didn't happen without the grit and grind of Indiana's unsung heroes. And when the moment came, they didn't just step up, they stole the show. Sophie Cunningham brought the fire. Off the bench, she lit up the scoreboard with 13 points and 7 rebounds, including 3 massive three-pointers that turned the momentum completely. Every time the Fever needed a jolt, Sophie delivered it. Her energy was infectious. Her shooting, cold-blooded. She didn't play like a role player. She played like a closer. And the crowd, they felt it. Fever fans went absolutely wild every time she let it fly. Then came Lexi Hull, the name you didn't expect to hear, but the performance you won't forget. She wasn't flashy, but she was everywhere. Fighting for loose balls, contesting shots, making smart plays. Her presence was steady, her effort relentless. She looked like she belonged in this moment, and the team fed off it. But the real X factor? Aari McDonald. She wasn't even on the roster earlier this season. But when her number got called, she showed exactly why the Fever brought her in. 12 points off the bench, quick decisions, lockdown defense, and fearless drives to the rim. She played with the kind of urgency that says, I've been waiting for this. This wasn't 1 or 2 players carrying the team. It was everybody. It was depth. It was buy-in. It was the kind of performance that makes you believe this team is more than just potential. They're dangerous. And as Indiana's role players exploded, the Lynx were running out of answers. But that was only half the story. If offense wins games, defense shocks the world. And that's exactly what Indiana did. The Minnesota Lynx came in expecting to control the tempo. Instead, they ran straight into a wall. The Fever defense was relentless. Every passing lane closed, every drive contested, every possession turned into a battle. The Lynx, a team known for crisp execution and smart decisions, looked rattled. And it wasn't an accident, it was a blueprint. Indiana didn't just play hard, they played smart. Switches were seamless, rotations were tight. They doubled at just the right moments and collapsed the paint whenever Minnesota looked to attack. And when the Lynx made a push, the Fever answered with suffocating stops. Minnesota scored just 39 points over the final 3 quarters. Read that again, 39 points. They were held to a miserable 34.9% shooting from the field. It was a complete defensive shutdown. Napheesa Collier, their biggest threat, was harassed all night. Natasha Howard made sure of it, bodying her up, contesting every shot, even ripping steals that turned into fast break points. Indiana didn't just slow Collier down. They took her out of the rhythm and made her work for every single look. And the most telling moment came early in the 4th. The crowd at Target Center came alive. Minnesota had clawed back to within 7, and for a second it felt like a classic Fever collapse was coming. But Indiana didn't flinch. 2 quick baskets from Aaliyah Boston, a clutch finish from Aari McDonald. Just like that, the run was dead, and the building fell silent. That's not luck, that's a team with killer instinct. But the best moment of the night hadn't even happened yet. Because just when you thought it couldn't get better, Caitlin Clark made her presence felt in the most unforgettable way. She didn't touch the ball once, didn't log a single minute, but Caitlin Clark still delivered the coldest line of the entire night. Throughout the game, she was exactly where a leader should be. on the sidelines, fully locked in, cheering, coaching, firing up teammates. The cameras caught her dialed in on every possession, even while nursing a painful groin injury that kept her out of the biggest game of the season. She wasn't sulking, she was leading. And then, the locker room celebration. Indiana had just pulled off one of the most shocking wins in WNBA history, without their superstar. The champagne was flowing, the Commissioner's Cup trophy was front and center, and the team was soaking in the moment. But everyone was waiting for her. Everyone wanted to hear what Caitlin Clark would say about this impossible, emotional victory. And when she finally spoke, 6 words. "Everybody in the league is sick." That was it. That was the quote. And it sent shockwaves through the league. Clark wasn't just celebrating, she was calling it out. The jealousy, the cold shoulders, the constant chatter. She said what every Fever fan had been feeling all season. The league didn't want Indiana to succeed. They didn't want her to succeed. And now they had to sit and watch as her team lifted a trophy without her. The mic drop didn't end there. Clark, grinning, lifted the cup like a chalice and jokingly toasted her teammates. Even rookie Michaela Timpson got called out to join the fun. It was joy. It was swagger. It was family. The locker room had fully bought into the us versus everybody mindset, and Clark's presence made that crystal clear. It wasn't petty, it wasn't forced, it was real. And it perfectly captured what made this win so powerful. But the story wasn't just about proving the haters wrong. It was about proving themselves right. This wasn't just an upset. This was a declaration. The Indiana Fever didn't just win a trophy. They showed the entire WNBA what they're made of. Depth, grit, leadership, and most importantly, belief. Every player on that roster proved they belong on the biggest stage, with or without their star. And that changes everything. This team just sent a message. We're not a one-woman show. We're not here for highlight reels and ticket sales. We're here to win. And they did it by playing together. 5 players in double figures. A suffocating defense that left the Lynx stunned. Role players turning into difference makers. Veterans turning into leaders. And now, they know they can do it again. When Caitlin Clark returns, healthy, rested, and fueled by everything that's happened, this team becomes absolutely terrifying. They won the Commissioner's Cup without her. Just imagine what happens when she's back orchestrating the offense, pulling defenders out to the logo, and feeding Boston and Howard in rhythm. No more double teams, no more clogged lanes, just chaos for every defense in the league. This game was a gut check, physically, mentally, emotionally, and Indiana passed with flying colors. They proved that championship DNA runs deeper than any single player. They proved that even when the spotlight fades, the fire still burns. And most of all, they proved that when you count them out, they rise higher. 2025 isn't just another season for the Fever. It's the beginning of something special. The final score read 74-59. But that number barely scratches the surface of what really happened. The Indiana Fever walked into Target Center as underdogs and walked out as champions. Not because they were the most talented team on the court, or because they had the biggest name in the game, but because they played with heart, with hunger, and with a level of belief no stat sheet can measure. They weren't supposed to win this game. They weren't supposed to survive without Caitlin Clark. They weren't supposed to look better when everything was stacked against them. And yet, here they are, holding the Commissioner's Cup, silencing the doubters, and making the league take notice. Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, Natasha Howard, Sophie Cunningham, Lexi Hull, Ari McDonald, Michaela Timpson, a roster that refused to fold when it mattered most. And on the sidelines, the most talked about rookie in basketball, Caitlin Clark, delivered the line that summed it all up. Everybody in the league is sick. She was right. This win didn't just shake the standings, it shook the narrative. It exposed the cracks in the jealousy. It reminded the world that the Fever aren't just Clark and the rest. They're a unit, a dangerous, locked-in, battle-tested unit. So, if you're still sleeping on Indiana, wake up. Because if they can win without Clark, just imagine what's coming when she's back. Comment below, I've got the Fever. Like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's next. The WNBA may never be the same again.